What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Real Hero Show. My name is Shane, and I am here with Corey. And a lot of our regular viewers are probably asking themselves the same question. Shane, what the heck are you doing hosting this video instead of Corey? Well, I'll answer that question. So in our Ted Lasso live stream, we asked for some feedback and recommendations on video segments that you all would like to see. And one of the overwhelming responses was that you'd like to see us review some older movies. And so we are introducing our very new segment called the Real Rewind on the Real Hero Show today. And because it is a rewind, we're doing everything backwards, which means I am your host and I get to tell Corey what to do. So first, I'll just start off by asking Corey, how have you been?
You know, man, I'm great. I'm a couple glasses of bourbon in for the evening, and I'm excited to. I don't even. Do we say who it is? I mean, it's on the ticker on the bottom of the screen. So if you couldn't figure it out,
yeah, we can
whatever.
say who it is now.
I'm excited to talk about some sci-fi stuff. It's gonna be a good night.
So yeah, on this show,
Devo, I agree.
Yes. Well, he's just laying down and barking at the same time, passively barking. On this segment, we're going to review anything and everything from popular older movies that we happen to really enjoy to maybe some cult classics and underappreciated movies that we think you should check out. Or maybe there's just a movie that we want to shit on for like 30 minutes. So it could really be any of these things in these segments. But
Rise of Skywalker, here we come.
Yes, we could. But today, we figured we'd get a little bit in the holiday spirit. So, you've seen a lot of Christmas decorations go up. There's some garland, strewn about maybe in your daily life. So we thought we'd bring the garland to you as well with writer-director Alex Garland. So we're going to be reviewing Alex Garland's first two features, the first one being Ex Machina and the second one being Annihilation. And in these segments that we do multiple videos, we'll make sure to include a timestamp in the time code below so that you can go ahead and click on to Annihilation if you want to watch just that one, or if you want to watch both. We're gonna go ahead and get started with Ex Machina. So this was Alex Garland's feature debut. He was a novelist and screenwriter before this, writing movies such as Sunshine, Danny Boyle's Sunshine. So kind of still in that sci-fi horror vein, but Ex Machina was his directorial debut. It came out in 2015 in the US, although it says 2014 on Wikipedia, so I'm not completely sure. But anyways, this movie is about Caleb, a programmer at a huge internet company played by Donald Gleason, who wins a contest that enables him to spend a week at the private estate of Nathan Bateman, played by Oscar Isaac, his firm's brilliant CEO. When he arrives, Caleb learns that he's been chosen to be the human component in a Turing test to determine the capabilities and consciousness of Ava, played by Alicia Vikander, a beautiful robot. However, it soon becomes evident that Ava is far more self-aware and deceptive than either man imagined. So, Corey, we'll start out with some brief, in case people haven't seen this movie yet, non-spoiler thoughts about this movie, things you like, things you dislike, maybe any fun stories or facts you have about it. So, floor is yours.
Yeah, man. So, first of all, I love both of these movies, and I'm really happy that we're talking about them because Ex Machina is a little bit more out there and people know about it. Annihilation, not so much. It didn't make quite as much money, didn't do as well at the box office. But for a first-time director to come in and do a movie like this is kind of incredible. I know that the auteur thing, whether you're like an Edgar Wright or a Rian Johnson or somebody like that writes your movies and directs your own stuff, I think it's a little easier to execute your vision than it is if you're just coming in and doing somebody else's script. But before this, like you said, he was writing books, doing screenplays. I think he wrote 28 Days Later.
He did. Yep, 28 Days Later as well.
Which is probably the first exposure that I had to some of his work. But for me, I think the best way to sum up this movie without diving too much into the spoilers is that it is an incredible example of how you can achieve a lot with very little.
Yeah.
That minimal sets, minimal actors, not a whole heck of a lot
people
going
in
on.
A house. That's it.
That's dialogue, great actors with a eerie score that just kind of makes you very unsettled, and a couple wide landscape shots, and that's all it takes to make something really awesome. It's also incredibly well paced. It literally flies by. It feels like it's a 45-minute movie. So
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of it. You know, anything with Oscar Isaac uh, tearing up the dance floor is always exciting for me. How about you?
No, I saw this movie in theaters. I'm a huge fan of this one as well. It was among one of my better theater experiences because I knew pretty much nothing about it going in. I wasn't super well exposed to Alex Garland before this, aside from Sunshine. I saw 28 Days Later actually after Ex Machina.
Okay.
I hadn't seen it at the time, but I saw Sunshine, and I'm mixed on that one. Maybe we can review that at some point.
Maybe.
But no, this is sort of my favorite genre of film. I mean, I love the big, science fantasy epics. Your Star Wars, your Dunes, your everything like that. But where I think sci-fi is best is when it takes a topic or some sort of like fact or Wikipedia article that we're all aware of. In this case, it's artificial intelligence, and it uses that to tell a fictional story that is very impactful and tells you about something about the human condition. That's really where I think sci-fi is at its peak. So movies like Arrival are very similar, or Contact. Any of those movies I love because they're very grounded. Like nothing you're seeing on screen is real or will ever theoretically happen, but it sticks to a set of ground rules that we're familiar with.
Right.
And that's what I love about this movie is it is trying to tell a story about what it means to be human, right? And we're all exposed to AI in our lives every day now. Like this is not a fantasy anymore. Like companies are using artificial intelligence models on pretty much everything, from like photo upscaling to actual like video games and stuff like that. There are self-learning computer algorithms now. And so it's something that's real, and it's taking that to the 10,000th degree in this personification of it through Ava, and Alicia Vikander puts on a phenomenal performance as Ava. But I think it's great because it takes something we're familiar with and it tells this small little story about what it means to be human. Do people have a soul? Or I mean, really, all our brains are is just fancy computers, right? So what makes us different than a really fancy computer? I love it. And I think the performances are great. I think Oscar Isaac was criminally underrated in this role. I think it's his best acting performance that he's ever done. I
Really?
think it's awesome. Yeah.
I think it's better than like Llewyn Davis and all that.
Yeah, I think it's better.
Okay.
I love his performance in this movie. And I also think it's a cool little commentary. And if you've seen Devs, it's also that's also a commentary on Silicon Valley, but this very much is. It's he's like this internet Silicon Valley CEO guy, and he's an egomaniac. He's your typical your Elon Musk, your Mark Zuckerberg type of persona in this movie.
Yeah. So can we get into spoilers now?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
If you have not seen this movie, stop now and go watch it. It is great. I expect probably most people watching this have seen it. It was a fairly popular movie. It did win an Oscar, so I think people were exposed to it.
Was it VFX? Is that what it won?
Yeah, visual effects. Okay. It was a sleeper. It was not supposed to win, but it just goes to show you don't have to have a massive budget to win that award.
Yeah. Well, and it had to really just be from Ava and the prior versions of her, right? There's really nothing else in the movie that is a visual effect.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a bit that's mixed with practicals, which I think is the best way to do CGI. Like if you mix it with something real, it sells it a whole lot more. It's why like Jurassic Park still holds up 20 years later.
Yeah, definitely. Oscar Isaac is a fucking animal in this movie.
He's so good.
Like you said, criminally underrated. I cannot agree with you more. The manipulative tone of his voice and the way that he, at least all the way until the end, because of course the evil guy has to get his comeuppance, but he plays Caleb like a fiddle, which that's the devil's instrument right there, and he just everything from like the beginning where he just wants to get Caleb to admit that Ava's incredible. And Caleb just spits off like a bunch of stupid tech jargon. And he's like, bro, shut up. Tell me how you feel.
Right.
And that's such a tech CEO type thing, right? Yeah. Like you see tech CEOs at this point, like in the news cycle, are almost treated like caricatures, like
Yeah,
you mentioned, like an
yeah,
Elon Musk or a
yeah.
Jeff Bezos or like even a Steve Jobs to a degree at this point. There's a little bit of all of that in Oscar Isaac's performance, and when you look back at it now, 5, 6, 7 years later, as far as AI has come and machine learning has come and all
Yeah,
that, it's almost like it's prophetic
yeah.
how this stuff is written. And like it's incredible. I don't sleep though on Donald Gleason. Donald Gleason's fantastic in the
Yeah.
movie, and I saw this for the first time. This is like a shame bell type thing. I watched it on an iPad, which was not the right way to watch it the first time. I wish I would have seen it in a theater. It would have been amazing. But I saw it after Star Wars: The Force Awakens, so I went into it and I was like, oh man, it's Poe and Hux,
Yeah.
and they're totally flip flopped,
Yep.
and it's
Yep.
like so good. Alicia Vikander is awesome, and her career she's gone on to do great things. She was in The Green Knight this year, which was one of
Yep.
my favorite movies of the entire year so far. I can't say enough good stuff about it. Like even rewatching it, it was hard to find nitpicks on things that
Yeah.
I didn't really like about the film.
I it's one of those movies that accomplishes exactly what it is meant to accomplish, and no more or no less. I wouldn't put it on like a pedestal as like the, greatest movie of all time, but like for what it's set out to do, I think it's nearly perfect.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of movies like that where it's like I wouldn't put this in like a top 10 film of all time list, but if you look at like the execution of the concept they were going for, there's nothing wrong. And this is one of those movies. I will say that seeing it in a theater was incredible, if only for that dance scene.
Yeah.
I have never seen a group of more confused people than watching that dance scene in the theater. Everyone wasn't sure whether to laugh or like, be a little bit like off put by this scene. But it's so good, and Oscar Isaac just kills it. I'm gonna
He
tear a fucking
does.
dance floor. That's what I'm gonna do, and
And
just slays.
between this and Annihilation, which we'll get into in a few minutes, there's just like this innate level of horniness in all this stuff that Oscar Isaac is in. And then like you
Yeah.
watch like he's on like the press tour for Dune and he's like rubbing Rebecca Ferguson's ear and shit. And I'm like, this guy, like what is his deal? And it just goes into all of his characters
Yeah.
and and it works. It like that character is extremely believable because he has isolated himself as a gazillionaire of a
Yeah.
tech company to the point where the only way that he gets off is by dancing with a robot that's programmed to mirror his moves. Like,
Yeah.
if that doesn't tell you enough about that character in one scene that's like a minute and a half long
Yeah.
out of an hour and 45-minute long movie, like that stuff's is just genius to me. It's so good.
And I think it like that scene it's crucially important to his character, but it's also like I think important to the flow of the movie. Having that little bit of levity in there kind of breaks up a movie that's pretty like slow
Mhm.
and dreary. Most of this movie is very like methodical and talking about big concepts, and then you've got this little dance scene that stands apart from the rest of the movie in terms of tone. And I just thought it was a really nice change of pace.
Yeah.
We'll talk about Annihilation later, but it doesn't really have a scene like that. It's kind of really one note dreary. But I really appreciated that scene for just being like this giant what the fuck moment in this
Mhm.
middle of this movie.
Well, it's also
Um,
really cool because when he goes to do the dance scene, he flips the lights to red, which the
yes,
only other time in the movie where the lights go red is when there's a power failure and you're locked in your room and you can't go anywhere. This is literally the polar opposite side of the spectrum. This is fun time,
right.
this red light. But at the same time, for Nathan's character, red light time is also fun time for him because he's got the battery operated camera in the room. And this is when he finds out how Caleb and Ava are really connecting
Yeah,
and talking to each other instead of the way that they kind of put a facade up because they know there are cameras everywhere. So it's just like little tiny things like that when you rewatch it. This is a movie that's good to watch 2 or 3 times because you
agree.
pick up on the subtleties.
Yeah,
I know a lot of people aren't really into that because they're like, why do I have to watch the same movie 3 times? But if you
you don't have
do,
to.
it rewards you even
Yes,
more for doing so, which is
right.
really fun.
Yeah, and in movies like this, especially science fiction, where you find out more plot as you go along,
Mhm.
you can go back and look at the earlier scenes, and they start to make a lot more
Yep.
sense. I enjoyed that about a movie. I mean, I like being able to rewatch a movie and it not being necessary, but it being rewarding. Arrival is very much like that as well,
Yep.
where you find out some things throughout the movie that if you watch it again, it suddenly like hits you a whole lot harder.
Mhm.
So before we move on to Annihilation, I want to ask what your opinion on the ending of the movie is, because it's a bit dark, and I think it's not necessarily controversial, but it doesn't really end you on a happy note.
Well, I mean, if you're a fan of this channel, and if you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and click that subscribe button. Let me guess my host duties in here. Um, I like dark, dour shit. Like that speaks to me. I think it's not always the wrong thing to do, but it always feels like it's the easy way to go to like the happy ending. But I mean, for Ava, this is a happy ending. You get
Yeah,
that killer shot of her shadow that then pans up to her in the real world at the end, and it's just like, man, she's free. She's the female that is broken out of the male prison, and
yeah,
like that's a happy, triumphant thing for her. At the same time, Caleb is this completely innocent dude
yeah,
that basically got duped into this week long
yeah,
experiment. He gets left in an air sealed container to die,
yeah,
which is pretty terrible. So it is very Alex Garlandy though. Like if you watch all of his stuff, whether it's
yeah.
this or Annihilation or Devs, which are all fantastic, and you should check them all out. Uh, he's like a I feel like he's probably a crotchety dude in real life because like your real personality tends to come through in the stuff that you write, and not everything is happy, but it is good and it's thought provoking. And when the credits roll, you have to kind of like stew in it and marinate in it for a little while and really formulate your thoughts, which to me is a hallmark of a good film.
Yeah. So to me, this ending is perfect. In not in a way that I want it to be, but in a way that it should be. Because if you think about it logically, there's no reason why Ava should have that empathy, right?
Uh-huh.
To save Caleb. She is doing the logical thing to escape, and she does. That as bad as it is for Caleb, this poor guy, she is doing kind of what she's programmed to do.
Exactly.
She is surviving,
Yep.
and that is the way to survive. Is don't let anybody that knows you're a robot uh, get out of the room.
Right.
So I do think she's going to run out of battery power at some point. I don't
Probably.
know
Yeah.
how that's going to work because she does charge every night, right? Didn't they establish that?
I think so. Yeah.
So maybe it's a short-lived little happy moment, but I think it ends on a nice little vignette of her just looking out at people, just observing.
Well, if she makes it to 2021, there's USB-C to Lightning that she can charge off of, which is much faster than traditional USB. So,
All right. Before we move on, anything else you want to say about this movie, Corey?
just at the end, the imagery when Nathan gets stabbed, he first gets stabbed in the back, then he gets stabbed in the front, and then as the scene goes on, the blood just kind of pours downward on an angle, kind of like a volcano spilling out. And it's just like it's so simple because he's wearing a white shirt.
Yeah.
And like, of course, he's wearing a white shirt for the scene where he's going to get stabbed because it's like maximum effect out of all the
Yeah.
blood and everything. And just the look on his face when all of that
What's
happens,
he say?
like,
Like fucking unreal or something like
yeah, like
that.
he's like he feels like he's betrayed, and it's
Yeah.
like, bro, you program these people to
Yeah.
be this, or not people, they're fucking robots, to be this way. It's fascinating. It's a very thought provoking movie,
Yeah.
and again, when you think about it, the main cast is like four people,
Yeah.
and like that's so cool to me. It doesn't have to be Avengers Endgame with 400
Right.
characters
Right.
to really hit you hard.
Yeah. Although, so we'll pass on to Annihilation
Yeah,
here.
let's do it.
So this is Alex Garland's second film. The summary goes as follows: So Lena, played by Natalie Portman, a biologist and former soldier, joins a mission to uncover what happened to her husband, played by Oscar Isaac again, inside Area X, a sinister and mysterious phenomenon that is expanding across the American coastline. Once inside, the expedition discovers a world of mutated landscapes and creatures as dangerous as it is beautiful, that threatens both their lives and their sanity. So, unlike Ex Machina, which was kind of like this cult classic that won an Oscar, and quite a few people saw it. I mean, most people are at least aware of it. Annihilation, like 5 people saw this movie, apparently. It completely flopped at the box office. It didn't even release in theaters outside of the US. It was straight to Netflix.
Was it really?
Yeah, it was straight to
Hmm.
Netflix everywhere except the United States,
No kidding.
which strikes me as weird because you would think a movie like this would do better with European audiences in theaters.
Yeah, maybe.
And
Yeah. Huh.
US audiences kind of just want to see the blockbusters, and it actually released a week after Black Panther. So
Oh,
it was just kind of doomed
that's
to fail right
completely
off the bat.
screwed.
Um, but yeah, so spoiler or non-spoiler thoughts again, Corey. What do you think about this movie?
So this one's interesting to me because uh, it's so different from Ex Machina, and I feel like I've read some stuff where Alex Garland has said, "I don't like to wade in the same waters for too long, and I like to change things up, and I like to be different," which I appreciate. And once you get to the end of the movie, which we'll talk about once we get to spoilers, the movie's a really big swing. It is it's bold.
Yeah.
It's also interesting that it's adapted from a book,
Yep.
which I don't believe Ex Machina is. I'm pretty
It's
sure
not.
that's an
Ex
original
Machina is
screenplay.
original, and
Um,
Annihilation is adapted.
so it's interesting to see his take on that. I think he said though, I was doing some research where he was saying stuff like the core of the story is the same, but I reached out to the author about changes I wanted to make for the film version.
Yes.
And that's cool. You know, like a lot of times when there are book adaptations, and we see this all the time, whether it's a Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings or the Wheel of Time. There's all these different Marvel, because they're all books, they're comics, right? There is not always collaboration with the whether it's an estate or the author or whatever. So I think it's cool that he kind of got the author's blessing before
Yep.
making some of those changes. Um, Again, I think the acting is pretty solid across the board. I don't think it's quite as good
Agree.
as Ex Machina.
Agree. The
Um,
performances are not as good.
I do think it is visually stunning,
Hmm.
and it's really weird because Ex Machina feels very real and it
Hmm.
feels very grounded in reality, where this feels almost like it almost like Avatar, like a Pandora type situation, right?
Yeah.
But like the most horrifying version of that that you could possibly imagine. So, and the non-linear storytelling I think
Hmm.
is interesting too, because Ex Machina kind of just plays from A
Yep.
to Z for the most part, and this kind of jumps around. It's almost got like a narrator type situation. So it's cool to see, you know, how filmmakers grow and develop, and I think there are some shots in this that are better than some of the shots in Ex Machina, and I think some of the use of lighting is actually an improvement, which is good because it shows growth in between
Hmm.
films from somebody who's not just resting on their laurels, which I dig. But I can't say anything else without going to spoilers, so I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah. So there's these movies that I've seen, numerous ones, where I'll go into the movie, I'll watch the movie. At the end of the movie, I'm like, that was fine. Like, I enjoyed that. It was cool. It was worth my time, but nothing really beyond that.
Mhm.
And then as I sit and I stew in it for another couple of weeks, I end up liking the movie a whole lot more than I did to begin with. And this is one of those movies for me, where upon my first watch, I thought it was okay. I'd give it maybe a 7 out of 10. But as I kind of thought about it, it's a very thought-provoking movie, and you kind of think about the imagery and the impact of everything that's going on. And as I thought about it more, I enjoyed it a whole lot more. I hadn't rewatched it until yesterday, actually. Rewatched it again, and I enjoyed it a whole lot more the second time around. I have my nitpicks with it. I don't think the performances are as strong. I don't know if the nonlinear storytelling really works for me that much. I think it could have been told linearly and maybe had actually a little bit more impact. But it's not a huge deal. Um, but no, I think it's a beautiful movie. I think it tells, like, it's so different than any movie I
Mhm.
think I've ever seen. In terms of structure, it's actually very similar to something like Arrival. Uh,
Yeah,
and
it even
really,
looks like
like,
a rival.
and the character is very similar to Arrival in
Yeah.
terms of like the start of the movie, and this is not spoiler by any means, is her as a professor talking to a class, which is
Hmm.
the exact same start as Arrival.
Hmm.
Um, which I didn't really catch that the first time I saw it, and then saw it again. I was like, oh yeah, same exact structure. Um, but no, I think it's a very strong movie. I think what I enjoy about it is it doesn't explain itself that much. Ex Machina kind of does the same thing where it poses questions and leaves it up to the audience to answer
Hmm.
those questions, because they're not necessarily fact based questions. They're very
Right.
much questions about emotion and the human condition and your opinion. I think the concept of self destruction, which is kind of the driving force behind this movie and the driving theme, is very strong and not one that I've really seen in many films before.
Yep.
And I think it's a good tie in with sort of the alien nature of the plot.
Yeah.
It's a good tie in between, just the human characters, self destruction, and the destruction of this alien shimmer, is what they call it in the
The
movie.
Shima.
Um, but again, like you, I can't really delve more into it without going into spoilers. So we'll kind of stop it here and say, if you have not seen this movie, go watch it now. Come back, see what we think about it, and see if you agree with it.
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out if that's how we're going to dovetail this into spoilers. Like, if you
Yes.
haven't seen this movie, it's worth your
Yes.
2 hours to watch it. Like,
Agree.
I know there's other stuff out there, but thought provoking film, beautiful looking film, definitely worth. Oh, and if you have a good speaker system,
Yeah.
it has a wild Dolby Atmos track.
Yes, it
It
does.
is very, very cool.
My dog was barking at all the crazy noises that
All
were
the stuff
going
at the
on.
end.
Yeah.
All right, so are we in spoiler territory
We're in
now?
spoiler territory.
All right,
We're
so
in man, bear, demon
the end.
territory.
We just need to go straight to the end.
We
Like,
Yeah.
the end of this movie is completely wild.
Yeah. It is a complete mind fuck.
It's insane.
Uh, so yeah, and so I think part of it is like understanding what happens, and like there are so many questions that this movie poses throughout,
Mhm.
that are kind of hard to catch your first watch, but among like my second watch, I kind of caught more of them in that, like, it's basically copying everything, and like it explains that it's
Yep.
refracting
Yeah,
everything,
that's what it is.
DNA, everything, mixing DNA and everything. But what I like about this movie is that the antagonist is not anything evil. It's just doing its thing.
Mhm.
Like the antagonist, and this is the I didn't want to spoil this from the non-spoiler talk, but like when she's talking about cancer in the first scene of the movie,
Yeah.
I'm like, I kind of hate that trope where it's like you're giving a presentation on the theme of the movie as the
Yeah,
first scene of the movie. Arrival does the exact same thing,
it sure
where
does.
it's talking about language and stuff like that. This is talking about cancer cells right in the beginning, and I feel like an idiot that the first time I watched it, I didn't immediately catch that. Oh yeah, this movie's going to be about cancer.
Right.
So I mean, that's basically what it is. It's saying that the antagonist of this movie, the alien, is just some like virus. There's some cancer. It's not really thinking. It's just kind of existing,
Yep.
and it is refracting everything around and creating its own reality by destroying everything else.
Yep.
And that is kind of how it survives.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting concept that you don't really have an evil antagonist.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, Shane, it's like, yes, there's the gator that has the Stranger Things set of teeth on the
Yeah.
inside, and there's the bear demon looking thing. But like, some of these mutated creatures are very beautiful looking,
Yeah.
and
The
they're
human flower
colorful.
things
Yeah,
are
the the
pretty.
the, the horns on the deer are flowers,
Yeah.
and like all that kind of stuff. It makes you wonder, like, okay, well, maybe this stuff wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't completely deteriorating human life. And that
Yeah.
also brings up the question of like, well, who are we to claim that it's our planet? If something landed here and did that, then maybe that's just like the natural order of things,
Yeah.
and that's how life goes, right?
Yep.
And we get the last shot of the movie. It's almost like the spinning totem at the end of Inception, where Oscar Isaac and Natalie Portman hug each other, and then as they get close to each other, both of their eyes start to shimmer,
Yep.
even though we think that the shimmer is gone because the grenade went off and kaboom and everything happens. So it's again, it's one of those things where those credits roll and it's that yeah, and it's like I think my subwoofer is rated to go down to like I think 16 hertz. And there's some stuff in this movie that goes down to like 18. So like the
Yeah.
bass is very, very low.
Yeah.
And they use that in a very impactful way, which is cool. Especially considering that the beginning of the movie almost has like a Last of Us style acoustic soundtrack. And
Yes. So The Last
that's
of Us 2 actually uses the same song, and I wonder if they saw this movie and then put it in the second game.
oh maybe.
Yeah,
That's
because
that's pretty
Joel
wild.
plays it on the guitar, the
Huh.
same song that's in this movie. And I actually
Interesting.
looked it up because I'm like, I have heard that somewhere,
This is
and
what
it
I
was
get
Last
for
of
not playing
Us.
that game yet,
Yeah,
even though you tell me to like every other week.
I
But
have. I've told
I
you
will
many
get to it.
times.
I promise. But yeah, all that kind of stuff. It just whether it's the music or the visuals or the way the performances are, it all creates a very unsettling
Yeah,
atmosphere, which I think is the whole idea behind this. Is are we alone? Is it okay that we're alone? Maybe it isn't okay, and we're about to get taken over by this. And then again, like you said, it doesn't wrap a bow on it.
no.
That's the final shot is you see their eyes doing that, and then it's like, okay, credits, annihilation. Goodbye, folks. Have a nice night. You know?
Yeah, so I'm going to invoke Vision from WandaVision. Have you heard the story of the ship of Theseus?
Uh,
Um, because that's the ending of the movie, right?
can
If
I
you
just say
replace,
real fast, you're not a Marvel guy, and
and
you
I
just pulled a
still did it.
WandaVision
I did
reference
it.
out. I dig that. I'm a fan. So, and Oscar Isaac is Moon Knight. It's all connected. Damn it.
But yeah, it's are these two people, Lena and Kane, Lena and
Kane.
Kane, despite them being exact copies of the real ones. I think that's at least what we're supposed to believe is that not only Oscar Isaac is a copy, we know that he's a copy.
Yeah.
Like
He
that's
doesn't,
established.
because she says to him at the end, "Are you Kane?" And he says, "I don't think so."
Right,
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 which is interesting because
right,
she's pretty sure that she's her,
right.
but then she still shimmers.
Right.
So
So that's what I'm thinking. And
yeah,
I think did she have that tattoo on her arm at the beginning of the movie?
don't think so.
Yeah, because she gets the tattoo that Kane had on his arm. I think.
Well, and
Uh,
then a couple of the girls in the group had that tattoo as well.
right, right. So
So
it's kind of mixing that in. Uh, this movie is also pretty terrifying and disturbing.
mhm.
There's two scenes in particular that we can talk about. The first one is the camcorder
The
that somehow
camcorder.
still has battery. Um, I don't know where they got their power, but yeah, the camcorder scene where they are cutting into this dude's stomach to see these like intestine worm things that are moving.
Worms, snakes,
Uh,
something, right?
that is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, a little bit.
I I couldn't really watch it. It's like that disturbing.
Oh
And
man,
then
I
of
love it. I
course,
was so into it.
uh, the second one being the infamous by this point man bear thing that growls and yells "Help me" at the same
Uh-huh.
time. That shit is scary.
That one is
Oh
so much
my
more unsettling
god.
to me than the
Oh.
camcorder thing. It just that's burned in my brain,
Yeah.
which is good because like
Yeah, I've
there's a
never
lot of
seen
horror
anything
stuff
like that.
that's outplayed at this
Yeah,
point, you know,
yeah,
and it's like, okay, I've seen this a million times. Okay, Michael Myers stabbed a guy in the neck again.
right.
Why'd he freaking die? You know, like
Yeah,
this is something different, and different is good.
yeah.
Different pushes you to think about things, and it frames stuff differently in your mind, and I appreciate that
The humanoid at the end is also pretty unsettling.
very.
The silver,
Yeah.
uh, and it's weird. Like that whole scene is just fascinating to me because all that thing is doing is copying.
Mhm.
Like, all it's doing is just mirroring exactly what she's doing, and it almost kills her because it's just replicating her and it's smothering her against the door
A door.
because it doesn't know any different. It's just going to keep going against the door
Man,
like she is.
dude, that shot where it's like her eye
Yeah,
and then the door, and then
yeah,
they pull focus away from her eye to just like a little splinter, and it's like the shallowest depth of field,
Yeah.
and you can still see the pain on
Mhm.
her. It's so fucking good. I
Yeah,
like.
it's great.
God, we talk about Marvel and Star Wars and shit a lot, but like stuff like that, you just don't see
Yeah,
it
you don't.
in those big IP movies. It's
Yeah,
so creative. It's awesome.
and that's kind of where I'm at, like, as a on filmmaking now, is like the Marvel movies just don't really do it for me that much, because you just don't get that level of filmmaking. Like, for me, the older, like, Jurassic Park type blockbusters, you still had the filmmaking creative aspect of it,
Mhm.
where it's like it's really trying to do, fun camera shots and long
Yeah.
like it's got the Spielberg look to it, and he's like a very talented filmmaker telling this dinosaur movie story, right?
Yep.
And you just don't see that as much in Marvel.
You
It's
don't.
and even Star Wars is maybe half a level above that, and there's some great cinematography in there too, but
There is.
it's still not to the level of what you see in the smaller budget movies. I don't think it ever will be, but I tend to like, a little bit more elevated level of cinematography
Yeah.
and
And
stuff.
when you don't have spectacle to rely on,
Yeah,
you have to figure out other ways to do it,
right.
which is what a lot of these folks do, and the result is something that's awesome. And this is not to shit on Marvel or Star Wars, because I love those things very dearly, and I'll still watch them. It's like a why not have both
Yeah,
type
yeah,
situation. Like if you love Spider-Man, then holy hell, the new Spider-Man movie is going to be amazing for you. But at the same time, you can also watch this
yeah.
and
And
enjoy
I
it
wish
and
more
enjoy the
people
craft.
would.
Right. Yeah.
Like this clearly was a movie that should have been seen by more people.
I
It
think so too.
has a great creative vision behind it. It is off-putting, and I
Hmm.
can totally understand if you watch this movie and you're not totally sold on it, because I was the same way. But the more you think about the movie, the more you realize, like, it's telling a pretty bold story that you don't really see that often. Like,
Hmm.
I find it hard to compare this really to anything. Like, it's telling a movie about a cancerous alien that is, you know, going to destroy the world by just shuffling everything.
Yep.
And it's telling this story about a marriage that's fractured, um, by an affair,
Hmm.
and she is going in because she feels bad about it. Like,
Yep.
her husband went into this shimmer because he found out about the affair and wanted
Mhm.
to just basically kill himself.
Yep.
Um, and so she's going in to kind of, because she owes him, according to herself.
Yeah.
Um, and it just it's a beautiful little story. And, like, I think it's interesting that the one woman's daughter died of leukemia, so that's another cancer reference. The other
Mhm.
one had cancer, so
Had
there's
cancer,
another
yeah.
cancer reference. There's a
Yep.
very cancerous theme going through
Cells within
here.
cells within
Yeah,
cells,
cells
cells,
interlinked.
interlinked.
uh,
I love Blade Runner
yeah,
2049.
it's
That's
great.
another favorite of mine. But
And then,
yeah, man, you said it yourself, the humanity of it, right?
yeah,
Like none of this stuff works if these characters are two dimensional. Whether it's Ex Machina or whether it's this movie,
yeah,
you've got depth in the characters, and there's a story for every single one of them, and it's explored, and everybody gets to have their little moment, even if it's just one scene here or one scene there for some of like the secondary or the tertiary characters. That's what Garland is really good at, and he even carries that over if you watch Devs, which Devs might be my favorite thing of his,
it's
just
very solid as
because
well.
you get to take the 2 hour concept of a movie, and like he stretches that out into, I think that's 8 episodes,
Yeah, it's eight.
and it's like you really get to dive into who those characters are and what their motivations are and all that. So it's all great, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, before we wrap up, I just want to say one more thing about the movie, which is it does feature a 95% basically female cast.
Yeah.
And it didn't make a big deal about it. And no executives patted themselves on the back for it and released like all these press releases about how bold they were. Alex Garland was like, you know what? I'm going to do an all female cast, and that's just how it's going to be. And
Yep.
that's how it should be. I feel like that's where we're going to get more representation
Mhm.
for females in Hollywood, is when they make this believable cast of characters, and it
Mhm.
it doesn't feel like a publicity stunt. It feels like a real, these characters were the best parts of for this role. These
Yes.
actors were the best choices for these roles.
And even when they do things that involve fighting or firing machine guns or whatever, it's
Yeah,
all extremely believable. It
yeah,
doesn't feel like they're fish out of water type
right.
situations. It's great.
Yeah, I just think it's sci-fi has always been good about representation, and this is no exception.
Yep, agreed.
But yeah, I mean, with that, Corey, if you don't have anything else, I think we can go ahead and wrap this up.
All I will say is if you haven't seen either one of these two films or the series Devs, which I think you can watch on Hulu because it was an FX show,
Yeah, that
you
was very
can
good
you
too.
can buy the 4K discs for both films. I think they're both like 10 or 12 bucks right now on sale. So like $20, you get a really great double feature, and then Devs is on Hulu. So check them all out. It's time well spent.
Well, with that, we'll wrap this up. Thanks everybody for joining our first ever Real Rewind. Um, I will hopefully try and host more of these going forward. I'm trying to get Corey to watch one of my all-time favorite movies, which Donald Gleason is also in, called About Time. We'll see if I can get him to do it, but we're gonna do a video on it if I have anything to say about it. But yeah, let us know what you thought in the comments. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, tell your friends. We're hopefully going to be doing a whole lot more of these rewinds because there's a lot of just random movie knowledge and opinions that are floating around our heads that have been sitting there for decades, and
So
we want
true.
to get that out. But until next time, we will see you guys in the next video.
Bye.